The silver Lexus didn't slow down as it tore straight through my blooming prairie rose field, kicking up petals and gravel like confetti at a hostile parade. I watched from my porch, fists clenched, as Evelyn Whitmore, HOA Queen of Magnolia Ridge, laughed into her phone like she owned the land beneath her tires. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just trespassing anymore, this was war. There are days I wish I hadn't given away my old tactical road spikes. Today is definitely one of them. The silver Lexus was back again, gliding through the middle of my flower rows like it belonged there, crushing delicate stalks of prairie rose and Indian paintbrush under its overpriced tires. She didn't even slow down. From my perch on the porch, coffee in hand, I could see her blonde hair gleaming behind designer sunglasses, her lips moving like she was deep in a phone call, oblivious or, worse, indifferent to the destruction. Third time this week. My name is Gavin Mercer, and 6 months ago, I walked away from 20 years of service in the U.S. Army as a logistics officer. I've managed convoys across war zones, negotiated checkpoints in regions where roads were more theory than reality, and spent more nights under open skies than I care to count. All of that I thought had prepared me for a peaceful life. I was wrong. When my grandmother passed, she left me her 48-acre flower farm in central Texas, Mercer Acres, a piece of land that had been in our family since the 1890s. It had once produced the region's finest wildflower seed blends, and Grandma loved telling me how folks would drive in from 3 counties over just to see her blue bonnets in full bloom. I came back thinking I'd honor that legacy. I spent the first few months restoring the irrigation system, planting heirloom seeds she'd saved in glass jars, and renovating the old farmhouse with my own hands. For a little while, it felt like peace was possible, and then Evelyn Whitmore arrived. The first time her Lexus tore through the edge of my planting field, I thought maybe it was a mistake, GPS gone wrong maybe. The second time I flagged her down. She rolled her window down halfway like I was some gas station attendant asking for her autograph. Yes, she said, not bothering to stop the slow roll of her car. I explained calmly that this was private land, that I was trying to grow organic flowers and her tires were flattening $2,000 worth of seedlings every time she cut across. She blinked at me slowly. This has always been a shortcut to the Ridge Club. Long before you got here, she said like I was the intruder. The main road takes forever. I told her it was still my land and not a public throughway. She smirked. I'm Evelyn Whitmore. I'm the HOA president of Magnolia Ridge. We have an understanding with the previous owner. That previous owner was my grandmother, I replied. And she never mentioned a damn thing about anyone having permission to destroy her flowers? Evelyn's tone changed subtly, her voice cooling. Well, perhaps you're unfamiliar with how things work around here. People like consistency, access, community integration. You might want to keep that in mind before upsetting the balance. And with that, she rolled up the window and drove off, spraying dust and petals in her wake. I stood there jaw tight watching the trail of crushed firewheels and bee balm. It wasn't just disrespectful, it was personal. 2 days later, I put up private property signs every 20 feet along the northern boundary. By the weekend, 2 were gone, and a third had been run over. That's when I called Deputy Roy Camden. Roy had been a friend of my grandmother's for decades, a man with a deep voice and a slow, deliberate way of speaking that only came from years of not being rushed by anyone. Ah, he said when I told him about the Lexus. You've met Evelyn. He took a sip from his thermos. She's been trouble since the day she got elected HOA president over there. Thinks the Ridge is her little kingdom. You know her husband's a developer, right? Charles Whitmore sure do. Built most of the Ridge in the first place. Now he wants to double it. Been buying up land all around. Folks are nervous. Something about the way Roy said it made my stomach twist. After he left, I looked into it. Took me all of 10 minutes to find a public planning document buried in the county's website. Magnolia Ridge Phase 2. A proposed luxury expansion with golf villas, man-made lakes, and yep, a new entry road that conveniently cut right through my land. My fields weren't an accident. They were a target. Later that week, I was walking the fields checking on a row of fragile stargazer lilies when I spotted a tire rut right through the irrigation tubing. Bent metal, split pipe, water spraying in a useless arc into the dry dirt. I stared at it then, at the Lexus tracks. Something hardened in my chest. I went back to the house, opened an old Army footlocker, and pulled out my field notebook. I made a list. Sensors, motion cameras, fencing material. I ordered everything that afternoon. If they wanted to make this a campaign, I'd treat it like one. Ms. Callie Trent, who owned the lavender farm next door, stopped by that evening with a pie and a quiet smile. She was in her 60s, wore wide-brimmed hats and denim overalls like they were armor. "Your grandmother taught me everything I know about perennial planting," she said as she handed me the pie. She also told me if anyone from the ridge ever started sniffing around to call her first. Guess I missed my chance. She shook her head. "Evelyn's been telling folks your land was basically part of the community, that the road through your farm is a historical easement. That's why they think they can do what they want." "It's not," I said. "There's no easement on file." I checked. "Doesn't matter," she replied. "They think they can make it one." That night I walked the northern boundary of the property with a flashlight and a notepad marking weak spots in the fencing and noting where Evelyn's car tended to enter. I mapped the entire flow of my field like it was a forward operating base. I didn't sleep much. By morning, I'd installed 2 motion-activated trail cameras, dug 3 posts for reinforced signage, and started pricing out portable fencing that wouldn't violate any visual ordinances, even though I wasn't in their damn HOA. The mail came with a letter official HOA stationery, a warning of potential fines for unauthorized visual obstructions and community access interference. I wasn't even part of Magnolia Ridge. They had no jurisdiction, but they were already acting like they owned me. Later that day, I found a Magnolia Ridge branded flyer on my gate. "Coming soon, Ridgegate Villas. Your flower view future awaits." The photo mock-up showed rows of homes looking out over what was unmistakably my petal field. I stared at it until my fists clenched. Evelyn hadn't just declared war. She'd already sent out the invitations. The next morning, I stood at the edge of the field, cup of coffee in hand, and watched the sun rise over the Texas horizon. My grandmother used to say flowers only bloom where the soil is defended. That day, I decided I wasn't going to let anything uproot what she'd planted. Not a Lexus, not a fake HOA, and not some queen in a pastel pantsuit with a clipboard and an agenda. Let them come. I was just getting started. By the time the 4th official notice arrived, hand-delivered and stamped with the Magnolia Ridge HOA crest, I didn't even bother opening it. I knew what it was: another fabricated violation, another absurd fine. This one claimed my newly installed fencing, the very same that ran along my own damn property line, was in violation of community visual standards and carried a fine of $6,000. The kicker, I'm not even in their community. Magnolia Ridge ends half a mile south of my boundary line, but that hasn't stopped Evelyn Whitmore from acting like she's queen of all she surveys. I stood in the kitchen of the old farmhouse envelope, in hand steam rising off my coffee, and realized this wasn't just trespassing anymore. This was a siege, a soft invasion wrapped in bureaucracy and faux politeness, the kind that didn't kick down your door, but slowly buried you under paperwork until you had no strength left to fight. Well, they picked the wrong man. I picked up the phone and called Nina. My sister might be 5 years younger and a good foot shorter, but she's the fiercest human being I know. Real estate and zoning law is her playground, and I knew once I told her what was happening, she'd come in swinging. They did what she snapped as soon as I finished explaining. "They're issuing fines for fencing on your land. $6,000, I said. "They say it obstructs their community vista." She let out a dry laugh that usually preceded legal mayhem. "I'll be there tomorrow. And Gavin, don't touch a thing. Don't reply. Don't even acknowledge them until I see everything." The next day, she pulled up in her practical black Subaru, wearing navy heels and a fitted gray blazer, like she was about to walk into the Supreme Court. She hugged me briefly, then marched straight into the kitchen, dropped her briefcase on the table, and opened a laptop with all the ferocity of someone cracking open a case file that screamed fraud. Within hours, she'd pulled the property lines, zoning maps, and HOA charter for Magnolia Ridge. "There it is," she muttered, spinning the screen toward me. "They're trying to trigger an involuntary annexation using an obscure clause in the city's Rural Development Code. It's total crap, no legal leg to stand on. But they're counting on you not knowing that. And if I hadn't called you, eventually you'd either cave or end up tied up in court while they built a public access road through your rosewood patch." She turned her attention to the stack of letters I'd saved, and she waved a few envelopes. "This isn't just HOA overreach. This is harassment." Later that afternoon, we took a walk along the field's edge, where the new fencing gleamed under the sun. Nina took dozens of photos, measuring distances, cataloging damage from previous trespasses, and noting every missing or tampered sign. "You've done everything right," she said. "Now it's time to go on the offensive." But just as we rounded the northern edge, I spotted fresh tracks, 2 sets of them, wide and deep. I followed them into my wildflower rows and found irrigation lines split open, black-eyed Susans flattened, and one of my drainage markers cracked in half. It wasn't Evelyn's Lexus this time. This was smaller, lighter. Golf carts, HOA branded judging by the tiny tire treads and the shape of the bumper gouge in the dirt. "That's it," Nina muttered, pulling out her phone. "We're documenting this, filing a formal cease and desist, and if they keep pushing, we'll escalate." That evening, we sat at the kitchen table sifting through everything when there was a knock at the back door. I opened it to find a woman I barely recognized, shoulder-length brown hair, canvas jacket, no makeup, and tired eyes that had seen too much HOA drama. "Gavin," she asked quietly. "I'm Tori Daniels. I live in Magnolia Ridge. I heard—" "Well, I've been watching." I glanced back at Nina, who nodded. "Come in." Tori stepped inside, glanced around like she expected someone to be watching her, then handed me a flash drive. "These are the Ridge's last 2 years of financial records. I work in accounting. I know where to look." "You're giving me HOA records?" I asked. Why, she looked straight at me. "Because Evelyn fined me $400 for having sunflowers in my front yard. Said they were unauthorized. Then she threatened me with legal action when I installed a bat box for mosquito control. She's turned Magnolia Ridge into a prison with landscaping rules. But now she's targeting people outside the community. You're not the only one who's had enough." Nina opened the files. Her eyes widened. "Oh, this is good," she whispered. "Look at this. Evelyn's cousin's landscaping company received $38,000 last year for beautification services, but there's no record of the work being done. And here $12,000 for community events that were hosted at her private residence." Tori leaned in. "Last Christmas, she hosted a community fundraiser in her backyard. We showed up with canned goods. Turned out it was her daughter's Sweet 16 party." Nina grinned. "We're going to bury her." Over the next few days, we assembled a case. Nina filed formal complaints with the county zoning board, sent cease and desist letters, and prepared affidavits documenting every violation. Meanwhile, I got to work on reinforcing the farm. My cameras had been upgraded to infrared, motion sensors tied to alerts on my phone. I started designing deterrents that were effective, legal, and let's be honest, a little humiliating. High-pressure irrigation nozzles that could spray intruders with organic compost tea. UV reactive marking dye to identify unauthorized vehicles. Light-sensitive alarms that would sound off a shrill hawk screech if tripped. But it wasn't just me fortifying the farm. Tori introduced me to other residents who were tired of Evelyn's regime. One man had been fined for wind chimes, another for using a wooden mailbox instead of aluminum. One woman had been reprimanded for leaving her trash bins visible for more than 45 minutes. We called ourselves the Resistance, half joking at first, but soon it felt real. A quiet alliance forming in the shadows of a manicured community. Evelyn must have sensed something was brewing because the next week she hosted a neighborhood unity brunch at the edge of my farm. White tent string quartets, catered croissants, all set against a sign reading Ridgegate Villas, coming spring 2026. I watched from a distance, binoculars in hand, as she gestured toward my field like it was already part of her kingdom. Soon she told one guest loud enough for my drone to pick up, "This whole space will be the crown jewel of Magnolia Ridge." I looked at Nina, who was watching the footage with a cold smile. "She's going to walk right into it," she said. "She's building her own downfall in broad daylight." But I wasn't so sure. Evelyn wasn't just arrogant, she was calculated. And something told me she had more tricks coming. That night, just after midnight, my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I flipped open the feed. 2 HOA golf carts, 3 young men. One held a can of spray paint. Another carried bolt cutters. They moved along the fence line, cutting zip ties, ripping signs, tagging one post with the words, "Community Land." I hit record. Then I picked up the phone and called Deputy Roy. "It started," I said. "They're escalating." Roy arrived 20 minutes later, saw the footage, and nodded slowly. "Keep documenting. Don't confront them directly. The more rope they take, the better the knot they'll tie themselves with. As he left, I turned back to the footage. Something in me shifted. This wasn't just about a flower farm anymore. It was about every quiet voice Evelyn had tried to silence. Every rule she bent, every neighbor she punished, every legacy she tried to erase. I looked out at the moonlit fields, the rows of bluebonnet and prairie rose swaying in the breeze, and whispered into the night, "You want to fight, Evelyn. Then it's going to bloom in full color." The morning after, I caught the golf carts on camera defacing my fence. I stood at the edge of the field, boots sinking slightly into the dew-soaked soil, and watched the prairie roses tremble in the breeze like they already knew what was coming. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours. The footage replayed in my mind all night, the laughter, the spray paint, the arrogance. This was no longer subtle harassment. This was a coordinated campaign. But what they didn't know, what Evelyn Whitmore would never understand, was that I had learned to fight in places where maps were lies and every safe zone was temporary. And now they'd forced me to turn my flower field into a battlefield. Nina was already back in Houston filing the paperwork for a temporary restraining order and collecting sworn statements from residents. Tori Daniels had quietly organized a group of Ridge homeowners who were fed up with Evelyn's dictatorship. Some were scared to come forward, others just wanted out. But after seeing her weaponize a private HOA against someone who didn't even live in their subdivision, something in them shifted. Now they were ready to act. I started the next phase. I doubled the cameras, added a discreet drone patrol on rotation, and refined my deterrence. The sound blasters now emitted the screech of a hawk, followed by a randomized series of shrill tones, annoying but perfectly legal. The tire traps were hidden beneath decorative gravel, rigged to harmlessly snare wheels without causing damage. I even mixed a biodegradable UV reactive marking solution, safe for the environment, but guaranteed to stain tires and bumpers with bright fuchsia streaks visible only under sunlight. Just enough to make intruders feel watched, marked, and uncomfortable. Nina called midweek with an update. "Gavin, their next move is a PR play," she said. "Evelyn and Charles are holding a garden gala this Saturday. Press, developers, city officials, the works. And guess where it's being hosted?" I didn't need to guess. Right next to the northern boundary. She's going to use it to announce Ridgegate Villas Phase 1. She's expecting your land to be part of the future layout. It's all smoke and mirrors, but if the media eats it up, then the pressure campaign escalates. Exactly. That's why we're going first. She laid out the plan. While Evelyn strutted for cameras, we'd be hosting our own demonstration on my property with local reporters and HOA residents invited by Tori's network. We'd show the truth, every system I'd implemented, every violation I'd documented, every quiet weapon I'd deployed: sunlight, facts, and transparency. Friday night, I tested every sensor camera and signal relay. The farm looked peaceful, but beneath the soil, beneath the petals and pathways, everything was primed. As dawn broke Saturday morning, I dressed in a clean blue workshirt, jeans, and my grandfather's old field hat. By 9, 3 news vans had arrived. By 10, there were over 40 people standing quietly by the barn: reporters, residents, and 2 environmental inspectors from the county. I stood before them in front of my great-grandmother's rose arbor and took a slow breath. "Good morning, I'm Gavin Mercer. I'm a farmer, a veteran, and the grandson of a woman who believed the soil could heal anything if you treated it right. Over the last 3 months, my land, my crops, and my family name have been harassed, vandalized, and threatened by people who believe rules don't apply to them. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what I've done to protect what's mine legally, peacefully, and without apology." For the next 30 minutes, I walked them through the perimeter. We watched as a test vehicle rolled over the trap zone and harmlessly locked its tires. We activated the sound deterrents, showing the decibel readings stayed below nuisance thresholds. We revealed the UV dye under blacklight, tested the emergency water sprays that doubled as irrigation and non-lethal deterrents, and played footage of trespassers cutting fences and removing signs. By the time we returned to the barn, no one was asking if I was overreacting. They were asking why the sheriff hadn't already filed charges. That's when the commotion started at the boundary. Evelyn's garden gala had begun. White tents shimmered in the sun. Guests clinked glasses of champagne and wandered among tall floral displays that had been stolen, yes, stolen, from designs my grandmother once published in the Texas Growers Almanac. Then, with the confidence only arrogance can produce, Evelyn got into her freshly detailed Lexus and drove it straight toward my field. She passed the first sign. then the second, then crossed the boundary. I watched from the monitor as the system activated. First the sound blasters her Lexus jerked slightly, then the gravel trap the car jolted as the front wheels got caught. She hit the gas only to find the biodegradable fuchsia foam begin clinging to her tires. Then came the spray non-toxic compost water, misting through her open windows, streaking her ivory interior. And finally the drone circled above, live streaming it all to the HOA accountability channel. Evelyn screamed, I mean full-throated, furious, unfiltered rage. She fumbled with her phone, dialing 911, shrieking about sabotage, terrorism, chemical attacks. 20 minutes later, Sheriff Roy Camden arrived, lights flashing but no sirens. When he stepped out of the cruiser and saw Evelyn trapped in a pink-splattered Lexus in the middle of my field, his lips twitched. Mrs. Whitmore, he said flatly, I'm going to need you to exit the vehicle. Arrest him, she yelled. This is war. Roy raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, you've trespassed on private property that's clearly marked, you've ignored written notices, and you've triggered legal non-lethal security systems. He looked over at me. You got footage, I nodded and handed him the tablet. Full live stream, saved and archived. Roy sighed. You want to press charges? I shook my head. Not yet. But I knew we weren't done. That night, while cleaning up from the demo, a call came from Nina. We've got her, she said. Tori got her hands on an audio recording. Evelyn left a voice memo by mistake intended for a contractor. She outlines plans to apply pressure with an anonymous fire and blames you in advance. Is it enough with the vandalism footage, the financial records, and the live stream? It's more than enough. And Charles just sent an email to the HOA board distancing himself from her. He's not going down with her. The next morning, Evelyn and Charles held a press conference. I watched it from the porch. Evelyn stood stiffly in a white suit, dark sunglasses hiding her face as she accused me of eco-terrorism and violence. She claimed my farm was a danger to the community, that my traps were unregulated weapons, and that I had targeted her specifically. But the reporters weren't buying it. They asked about the fuchsia dye, the drone footage, the HOA fines sent to non-members. Then someone asked about the alleged voice recording. Evelyn froze. Charles shifted uncomfortably. And then, to everyone's shock, he stepped to the microphone. I can no longer support the actions of my wife in this matter. I believe she acted without oversight, falsified documents, and misused HOA funds. I will fully cooperate with any investigation. Evelyn turned to him like she'd been slapped. Her voice broke. You said you'd back me. I said I'd protect our family, Charles said quietly. Not your ego. It was over. Within a week, Evelyn was arrested, charged with fraud, conspiracy, and destruction of property. The HOA board voted her out in a landslide. Tori Daniels was elected interim president and immediately began reforming the group's power structure. Charles withdrew all Ridgegate expansion plans and issued a formal apology. As for my farm, the soil still bore scars, but new blooms were already pushing through. The roses had survived. The lavender swayed again, and the prairie rose, toughest of all, lined the edges like soldiers at attention. Months later, Evelyn returned. No press, no fanfare. Just a battered Lexus and jeans instead of pearls. She stopped at the boundary and didn't step over. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a check covering damages and a note. Flowers bloom where the soil is defended. I understand now. I was never invited here, I just assumed I belonged. I watched her drive away, the fuchsia stain still faintly marking the tires, and I smiled because here at last the thorns had done their job. Sometimes the biggest battles aren't fought overseas or in uniform. They're waged quietly in our own backyards, in the soil we inherit, and the principles we refuse to compromise. Gavin Mercer's story is more than just a tale of a flower farmer versus a power-hungry HOA president. It's a powerful reminder that boundaries, both physical and moral, must be defended not just with strength, but with strategy, integrity, and the courage to stand firm even when no one else is watching. The lesson here is clear. Don't let others redefine your worth, your land, or your legacy. When someone tries to intimidate you with authority they don't rightfully have, when they twist rules to serve their greed, or when they mistake silence for surrender, it's in those moments that we must choose to rise. Gavin didn't retaliate with violence or rage. He responded with documentation, preparation, and a level-headed determination rooted in truth. He turned every act of trespass into evidence, every insult into motivation, and every tool of oppression into an opportunity to expose the truth. Let this be a message to anyone feeling overwhelmed or outnumbered. You don't have to shout to be powerful, and you don't have to fight dirty to win. The most lasting victories come from those who protect what's right without compromising who they are. To all our listeners here on US Daily Story, thank you for following Gavin's journey with us. Stories like these reflect real tensions in everyday American life between power and principle, between community and control. And they remind us that resilience, when paired with quiet bravery, can shift the balance. Whether you're protecting your land, your name, or your peace of mind, may you find strength in knowing you're not alone. And may you always remember, just like flowers bloom brightest after a storm, justice often arrives right when we think all hope is gone. Thank you for being part of this community. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of someone in your life, leave us a comment, share it forward, and don't forget to subscribe to US Daily Story, where every bloom, every battle, and every breakthrough gets the voice it deserves.